it's a different market, it's a different world, and at first they should accept reality.
If you have the narrative with the data, you can then build success off of what you're building.
I bet you any money, none of the readers who started the article will read the last paragraph.
So things are shifting, but I think the relationship between narrative and data still exists big time.
It's not like a 0-1 game. Maybe some themes in Web3 have to be narrative driven, like meme coins.
That it's not just Web3, right? That narrative is sort of king in Web2 as well. Hey everybody and welcome. We're here today to talk about how narrative is shaping Web3 markets more so than data, right? So narrative is king in crypto. My name is Ahmadi. I'm the head of marketing at Decent Labs, and I'll be moderating this panel. I think we should start off with maybe 5 minutes of introductions if everybody wants to go down the line and maybe introduce yourself and your company and what you guys are all about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. Hi guys, my name is Chris. I'm with CLS Global. We're basically market makers. We've been in the industry for roughly over 7.5 years now. Initially, before we started off as market makers, we were actually doing trading for smaller hedge funds on the New York Stock Exchange. When the crypto boom happened in 2017, we then moved over to crypto as market makers. And since then, we've cemented our reputation. We've grown as market makers. Currently, we're working on top-tier exchanges, both on centralized exchanges, over 100 exchanges actually that we support. We have a client base of over 600 clients that are currently working with us. And we've built pretty much an entire ecosystem of advisory, marketing, counseling, and tokenomics, just a whole full-blown Web3 aspect of supporting projects from an early stage all the way until the launch stage, and then, of course, keeping up with the trading thereof. Yeah.
Hey guys, my name is Momot. I'm CEO and founder at Peanut Trade. I'm in industry since 2013, and what we are doing, we are, maybe we can say we are data-driven market makers, since we have such a panel today. But we are working with communities, so we have two legs. One leg is prop trading, mostly market neutral, like HUT, XEX arbitrage, something like that, and another leg is working with our clients and trading with their assets, with their inventory. So we are trying to do it in a most efficient way, beneficiary for the clients. It's not a typical way in market making. Maybe we can discuss it later. So that's it. Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is Ashton. I'm part of OpenMesh network. I'm the founder of OpenMesh network. Got into crypto 2015. I used to run Ethereum meetups in Sydney, Australia. So right now, focusing on building decentralized protocols and decentralized networks. So OpenMesh is a decentralized cloud network, similar like AWS, designed for Web3 industry. So for the last 4 years, we've been building, working with a lot of large data centers to bring a cheap GPUs and services into Web3 industry. Yeah, so this year is going to be a very exciting year because we're going to be launching our protocol to public. But yeah, so we're very excited to be here.
Hey, my name is Gleich. I'm the co-founder and international ambassador to the European Blockchain Association. We mainly do business in advising jurisdictions and authorities in regulation around DLT, blockchain. So we were pretty early, I would say, in doing this with what we've heard before already, the government of Liechtenstein, and then also in the region here, helping some authorities to get their grip on virtual asset licenses and how to set them up, also in the broader context with taxes, federal bank, and so on.
Hello, hey everyone. My name is Nandit, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Lighthouse. At Lighthouse, we are building permanent decentralized storage infrastructure for developers and enterprises. So we have right now more than thousands of active NFT, DeepIn, and AI applications who are uploading data on us. And underlying Lighthouse, we heavily use and leverage IPFS and Filecoin miners as well. So we started it 3 years back from my personal experience where I thought I don't want to pay a cloud storage provider every month to store my data. So can I use Web3 to build like a better alternate where I can pay once and store my data long term and forever? So with my experience of that and my personal experience of building into the Web3 ecosystem, I started with Lighthouse, and now we have like millions of data objects which are regularly uploaded on our platform as well. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about Lighthouse, but in general as well, deepen narratives and the data that drives the market.
Thank you, everybody. And it's great to have you here. I think we should start off with just answering the question, do you agree that narrative really beats data when it comes to moving markets? I think that's a pretty touchy subject for a lot of people, especially, when you have, data-driven decision makers. I think we all understand the value of data in building efficient and effective companies. So in your experience, what is the relationship between narrative and data when it comes to impacting Web3 markets?
Yeah, what I've seen, and I think before we even tackle the question of the relationship between the narrative and data, we pretty much take time to sort of set apart the differences between the two or how they exist in the market. The narrative, or let's say the data aspect of things, is usually, we know the data is on-chain data, transactions, number of swaps, tokens, all of that happening on-chain. Off-chain, we're talking about community engagement, interaction, social media, Discord, Telegram, and Twitter. And then, of course, we talk about ownership data, which is wallet addresses, amount of stake tokens, all of that happening. Then we talk a little bit about the narrative thereof. Narrative is basically sort of the story behind the project, the team, the project vision, mission, the goals of the project. So together, this all forms one sort of big portion of success for a project. I personally believe there's no if a project sort of has a system whereby they have a good narrative with no data to back the narrative up, there's no success for that project. Same thing goes in with the presence of data without narrative. That just means it goes unnoticed, because the narrative sort of brings that engagement that the project needs. So in the end, the relationship now, to get to your question, between the two and the importance thereof is the fact that if you have data, you can back up the narrative that you're trying to build for the project. And if you have the narrative, if you have the narrative with the data, you can then build success off of what you're building, right? And a lot of people as human beings, we buy into the narrative, A lot of the projects that have launched, a lot of these big projects have sold us sort of the dream, of believing that we're decentralizing finance, the dream that we're taking over our money, But of course, a lot of them manage to back that up with the data. We've seen them increase in value. We've seen them increase in sort of support and investments and TVL. But others we've seen not so well. Even though the dream was good, the success wasn't that much because they lacked the data.
So it sounds like you need the data to back up the narrative that you're selling. Otherwise, what do you really have? Okay. Does anybody else have a take on that question that they want to? Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this cycle, narrative is much more important, definitely, because it's a retail market. A lot of retail come to our industry and try to understand what's happening here. And of course, sometimes it's really complicated to understand the differences with some consensus mechanisms like it was previous cycle, or some other technical details. They don't want to go deeply in some sense. They just want to choose some beautiful stories and invest money in it. So that's the reason why we have all that meme coin cycle, all that kind of stories behind, because stories are something that's easy to sell for marketing. And after that, maybe after some time, after they initially put their money in, They trying to do some more deep evaluation, trying to understand something, but still, it's not that kind of technology like we have 10 years ago or 5 years ago in previous cycles. It is more about the cool story and something very clear, acceptable, so very beautiful thing for retail public.
So you want to go? You go first.
Sure, sure. I think for me, there's a core dependency between, especially in the Web3 industry, the data and narrative. Because data will tell you what's happening and kind of like what it is. But for narrative is basically, that's the inspiration and where you're heading. So data to me, it's justify what's happening right now. Narrative to me is where you're heading. So I think it's up to the protocol to decide or the project to decide how to manage that. But the weird thing for me, the relationship between narrative and data is very, very like a core dependent in Web3. So it's very interesting to me.
Sorry, I just want to ask you to expound on that just a little bit, if you can. What do you find so interesting about that intertwined sort of nature that you sort of hinted at the end there? I want to dig a little bit deeper.
Sure. So, I mean, if you think about like we as humans, we are not like a spreadsheet. People cannot process spreadsheets. However, we are emotional creatures. We tend to hear stories, and stories it get to us, and also stories basically go far. When you have a really nice story about some sort of a project or a narrative, the stories basically spread it faster. And also we also attempt to attach ourselves with the stories. So I see the specific narratives also gonna touch certain types of audience. So the data itself, it's basically is good to showcase how things are. For me, it's like data is good to actually verify the truth. Narrative would be good to verify that truth with the story, right? So it's a double sword, but at the same time, if you well balance it correctly, I also see like a big difference, a shift in a Web3 space. Like I've been in Web3 since 2015. So I've seen the 2017, all the ICO boom, right? It was basically putting out a lot of imagination to the table and inspire people and building a minimal viable ecosystem. Early days. But today we have a better tooling, we have a better analysis to justify. So things are shifting, but I think the relationship between narrative and data is to still exist, big time.
So for going back into Web 2 before I go into Web 3, I have this beautiful example as a proof why I'm on team narrative. In 2013, I was leading a digital marketing agency in London, and one of our biggest clients was Samsung, who were at that time launching Galaxy Note device series, the one with the pen, and they were actually trying to have a new target group, mobile gamers. So they asked us, can you connect us with a cool game? So Peter Westerbacher at that time was the CEO of Rovio, the license holder of Angry Birds. I don't know who of you is still familiar with Angry Birds. And he's a friend of mine. So I asked him out, do you want to partner with Samsung? He said, yeah, sure we want, like being pre-installed to the launch. Oh, by the way, we're actually launching Angry Birds Space pretty soon. Almost the same launch date they were planning. So Galaxy Note, Angry Birds Space, and then Rovio has so many strategic partnerships with National Geographic, with the WWF, World Wildlife Fund, but also with NASA. So I called up NASA, and I wasn't expecting somebody to pick up the phone, by the way. And we managed within 6 months, because they had an astronaut change to the International Space Station, we managed within 6 months to clear some plush toys and a slingshot to explain the new gameplay from Angry Birds Space on board of the ISS, and then basically being played on a Samsung device. Beforehand, obviously, So that's the cool story. But in the background, there was so much of KPI negotiations with Samsung. Like, when is this launch going to be a real success? And the list of KPIs was endless. And the list of data, and the list of what does the ad server and programmatic advertising tell us? When is it a success? Nobody was caring about these KPIs. They were pushing onto before the launch. After the launch was, did we get the Guinness World Record for the biggest product launch ever? Yes, we did. Okay, it was a success for them. So that's why I'm team narrative. Even on B2B, it's very often on narrative, especially when you talk to marketing. When you talk to B2C, it's only narrative. Nobody's interested how your credit card works, what the background layers in payment structures are, who helps whom, what's the facilitator, which nobody's interested. Does it take money from my account if I pay? Does it work? Yes, perfect. And I think that's I'm so often when I'm on stage, people try to explain the most complicated things like CK, for example, zero knowledge. And then I see people in the audience and they go like, I have no clue what he's talking about. Don't explain tech with tech, right? We're not building tech for tech's sake, but we're building tech for usability. And if you see everything we're talking about, wallets, whatever it is, it's still bulky and bumpy. And then we're talking about RWA so often, and during this whole week we see RWA so often. It's such a cool topic. It's such a cool narrative. Again, but if the deal that was organized a few weeks ago between the Land Department and the first platforms to actually be regulated and to put the title deeds on a platform, RWA is cool, but it wouldn't happen. Now it has a chance to happen because of data in the background. But the narrative to people is you can buy real estate and put it on a blockchain.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with some of the other panelists' views. And I think narrative is something that we have to start in crypto because, first of all, it's a technology which is very internet native. And like people, I think here loves fun. They love the speculation element of it. And then for that, narrative is important. But parallelly, I think as founders, we need to be grounded enough to at least give a difference on what is in this narrative part of aspiration and what is the possible ground reality that can be there into the future. For example, when I started building into the decentralized storage ecosystem, I think I got attracted with the Filecoin's proposition that we have to build like a decentralized storage network. Then the network onboarded 20 exabytes of storage capacity. So that was something like aspirational to me that, okay, we can get to the scale of AWS, GCP, but now let's say 4 or 5 years later, we have to be more grounded on, okay, we got the supply side, but now where's the demand coming from? How much is the revenue that the deepened network is making? Another, I think, interesting example that is talk of the week is again the Pudgy Penguin ecosystem, because like when I bought into Pudgies, I think they are really cool and fun. But I watched one video of Luca where he mentioned that he wants to make Pudgy as the Disney. And like the next Disney which comes out of crypto. Will that be the case? I don't know. But I think it's like something to aspire for, and some of their action maybe reflects that they have a super marketing team with billions of Instagram impressions. So I think narrative is something which is really powerful, but then not just founders, but also to the consumers as well, we should be aware that how much of that is aspirational, how much of that is really that can be achieved on ground truth. But yeah, both goes hand in hand, but data is true as well.
So it kind of sounds like I'm hearing two things primarily from you guys. And number one is that data and narrative sort of go together, where data proves what's happening right now, where the value is on chain, in community, right? Narratives sort of give you this aspirational, hearts all in, buy-in into the future of where we're headed, gives you direction, gives you a place to go. But the second thing I'm hearing is that it's not just Web3, right? That narrative is sort of king in Web2 as well, with this, the Samsung launch that you described, for example. So I guess my question then is, does it matter? And what do we do about this fact, right? So if it's not just Web3, it's Web2 as well, and narrative is what really, converts users and gets buy-in and drives activity to your platform, not data. There's low data literacy. You know, what should founders and what should retail investors do each to protect themselves or to take advantage of the fact that narrative is really where, you know, people pay attention?
Well, I think a large driver of a successful narrative is authenticity. So if you're a developer and you pretend to be a marketing CEO guy, it doesn't work. Period. You know everything about your company, and pretty soon you would derive into your development nature, which is totally fine. But then let somebody else do the marketing, because you're absolutely authentic in talking to developers, and maybe you have some other person from your company that does marketing and speaks to marketing people, and maybe also, even if he's a CFO, to investors. So authenticity, I think, is key. This time that we're living in, it's really hard to reach users and be authentic, because the attention span even decreases. It's small already, but it even decreases. It's basically scrolling. And if you want to read an article because you're really interested, because it has an authentic beginning, you're pulled in because of the start of the article, for example, and the article goes like over 5 paragraphs. I bet you any money, none of the readers who started the article will read the last paragraph. None. And there are studies for this as well in user behavior that I'm super interested in. And that's why narrative is not only I can tell my full story about the product, about myself, why it's an authentic product because of my heritage, my family's heritage. I wanted to help, yada, yada. Everything you read, it's a beautiful story. But maybe one person will read it. Is this one person the decision maker or the investor who's interested? Maybe not.
All right, let's take a step back. So let's look at like a Web2 brands. So how Web2 brands attract people? So obviously utility of the product, whether it could be a car or an app. Let's take like Apple. Apple has a really strong association. It's like a social currency, right? It took a long time for them to build it. So if you change the narrative from minimal a viable product to minimal lovable product, which I would say Web2 industry is mastering to keep the users retention and keep the brand loyalty attached to your brand or the product. So that's what they want to be doing. That's their primary goal. So brand loyalty has a direct correlation with their sustainability of the company. But in Web3, we have a tribalism. So if you look at adoption cycles, the innovators, they always the opportunity for any Web3 projects to bring that initial innovators and then incentivize them with the token, which is very interesting, because if you're an Apple company and if you're building, let's say, great products, people love to experience the product and they love the utility of the product. That's why they are buying it or using it. But all of a sudden, imagine Apple, when you're using it, but you also have like shares from Apple company for the first. Imagine if this exists in Web2 world, it's a very, very different world. But in Web3 world, we have that. So I think this is where a lot of people also misunderstand utility versus speculation. To me, we have to use those things in a more ethical way, not to create like a massive hype and then you know how things are happening in the industry. But if you utilize the two worlds better, utility versus having your initial, let's say, minimal viable ecosystem, but if you attract those people, because if you think about the bootstrap problem in Web2 world, in order for you to sustain, you need to the income that you receive from the customers or revenue you generate from the users have to come back and as a positive cash flow for the business to sustain. But in crypto, or Web3 world, you can issue some tokens to actually compensate that bootstrapping problem, which is very interesting, right? So that attraction will come from the narrative and the story, similar to Wall Street bets. You know, they're not financially driven, but more like a tribalism going through a specific mission. They might be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they keep buying it or they keep selling it, whatever it is. So we have a property which called a tokenization and also distribution, which is on-chain or Sexes or Dexes, for us to be able to, be part of that. And those kind of, I would say, mechanisms and frameworks don't exist in Web 2. So it's very interesting to us.
So that ownership really changes the game a little bit, where you have a completely different dynamic than, yeah, interesting. Does anybody else want to address the question? Yeah, go ahead.
So, first of all, to make really fair and correct decisions, I think that founders and even fund managers or somebody who is interacting with the market should understand that that's the fact, and narrative is really powerful nowadays. And I know the guy who is a fund manager, and they are making decisions solely based on figures. And for me, it was shock, because like half a year ago, they trying to count number of transactions in the networks and trying to do a lot of things that is absolutely wrong in terms of hype or in terms of narrative or in terms of community. And that's a huge problem for the industry, because some people from TradFi come into crypto trying to make decisions based on their original logic or experience they've got in other industry in previous life. But for making adequate solutions here, they should understand that it's a different market, it's a different world, and at first they should accept reality. And then after they understand what is happening, they could rely on some specific figures, but not about the transaction count maybe for some small projects. Of course, for Ethereum or for Solana, we can have it, but for the small project that is going to be listed in, 6 months ahead, it is much more important to understand how community is feeling. And it will be the best hedge it's possible to do, because there is impossible to do something with the project token price if it's not listed yet. But you should make some decisions even before.
Yeah. Just to touch a little bit on the question as well. I'm sure all of us here agree that the biggest the biggest jam about Web3 is trust, right? Everybody knows that if you have trust from the community, trust from investors, trust from pretty much everyone you do business with, you pretty much are set up for success. Now, if you oversell the narrative of your project, and you exaggerate what you will become, and that eventually does not happen, then the trust gets lost. And once you lose that trust because you oversold a narrative, you have a major setback, right? So, which is why, as much as I'm for narrative than data, I still believe that you should be transparent with data equally in order to keep supporting your narrative. Narrative solely alone, oversold, usually comes back to bite you. But if you have the data and you're transparent about it, you keep sharing data, you keep showing data, I'm sure that it will somewhat contribute to the narrative that you're painting. That's my take.
I love that. I absolutely love that, what you just said. Like, the narrative for narrative purposes, for marketing purposes, is easily becoming oversold, as you just said. And if you use the data or the USP you have in how you use data, what data you use, how you proceed transactions, whatever it is, and it's not too technical, but it pays into the narrative, that's why you're authentic, as I said before, and that's why you're trustful. That's the perfect mixture.
Yeah, I think happy to add a last point as well, which I think towards the first panelist on what he said, that we need to be aware that it's a long-term game, and if founders also oversell and don't deliver, like it can cause reputational damage as well. And then we need to be aware of the legal implications too. Although parallelly, I was also thinking that maybe it's not like a 0-1 game. Maybe some themes in Web3 have to be narrative driven, like meme coins, while other have to be more data driven, like maybe DeFi, where you have to show that you have the volumes. Although maybe then you build the narrative that I want to target institutions or somewhere else. But meme coins as well, they start with like a purely narrative play. But in 2 years, we know that, okay, is there a community around it? So I think it's like hard to put all of the projects into one single basket. There are projects where narrative will play well from day one to even 2 years to when they have launched, while there would be others where in case of DeFi and Deepin, you will have to show data from day one, even though it's a test data itself.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, you kind of have an obligation there at that point. Ashton, I know you have to get going. Did you want to add anything else before you leave?
Yeah, sorry guys, I have to run to another commitment. So, to me, I think I agree with him. It's very important. Like, if you're a founder or a builder, it's very important. Understand your data. Your data that may not be someone else's data. So understand your insights, what define your success, and that's your truth. And then have a good balance based on what you want to do. You want to attract capital or attract users or want to attract, build a community. It's a very fine-tuned space. So for us, like infrastructure protocol space is a very different to like if you're a dApp or like a simple application. So my 2 sentences would be, don't hype too much. Focus on like real data, because the data is always going to actually tell you the truth. And you can actually have a vision, but then if you don't have a proper backing of your data to showcase your value, is not sustainable, especially in 2025. It would have been okay in 2017, but not 2025 and moving forward. Because what we are seeing now, from capital flow from a traditional world or within crypto VCs to actually protocols are wanting to work with you, they learn to actually cut the BS, right? So it's always to focus on your data, in my opinion. For me, 80% data and 20% narrative. If you have a technology build, early days, if you're early days, obviously you don't have any data, so you can be a little bit, on the other way around. But if you're an established project, focus on your data.
So, thank you so much for your contribution and for joining us today. So we're kind of running out of time here. I want to ask one more question, but I'll just run through and summarize. It sounds like you guys are saying, authenticity is king, right? And you need to pay attention to attention spans. People are not paying attention very much. So if you have a narrative that you're shilling, you can't oversell it. It has to be authentic, and it can't be too long, right? But you need to use your data to back up that narrative and to show that you are genuine and actually operating in the space that you're in, right? So we've got a few minutes left. With the last few minutes, what I would love to do is get a sense from you guys about the emerging narratives in the space right now, whether those are narratives that you're working on or that you see in the space as good examples of narrative done well, or conversely, narrative done really poorly if you feel like calling something out.
All right. I mean, what I'm sort of forecasting to be sort of the next sort of big narratives that we might probably see, which is something we're already seeing. One would be the real world asset tokenization aspect. We've seen quite a lot of projects coming in with the tokenizing aspect, and there's a lot of good narrative around it. Of course, the data is yet building on itself, but eventually, because these are real world assets, real world businesses that are already liquid, building data around that would not be as hard as a premeditated product. They already have a product, they're just tokenizing that product in Web3 and already have the data from Web2 to support the Web3 data. and just build a narrative and sell it. You know, that's what they're working on. So I know that's an emerging market. Another emerging market would be the AI. We've seen artificial intelligence has really been mainstream. A lot of projects are building protocols around that. And again, the data is there. Pretty much just needs to work on the data integration, but the narrative can easily be built on top of the AI. So these are the two industries that I see would be sort of forefront for the next run in Web3.
Yeah, so definitely I can say that narrative could broke the market condition and could change direction a little bit for the whole market. Probably one of good examples that I like is the peanut token, I mean, not us. We are not connected in any way, but everybody is asking. But it was a great example when several narratives, for example, opposition to current government. You know, it's a situation when someone launched a token about peanut and so squirrel and somebody else, it was another animal. And it was several narratives in one. Opposition to the current government of the city who decided to take these animals from the man. It was several things that strike people across the whole world, across the space, in the United States and other countries. It was clear message for everybody, so everybody is accepted that it could be a huge thing. And I don't remember exact state of market in the days, but I'm sure that something like that could change the state of the market and people will start buying other assets because of that, not only because that particular narrative is good, but they could change the mood over the different communities and make a proper launch for everybody. Just for your example, to understand how market influence on the token performance, typically we could say our clients that if market is good, you could have up to 3 times better performance at the start. And here, when narrative could show his power, it could be even 10 times more than with a regular market, with regular situation.
So on the topic of RWA, I think the here in Token Week, speaking to experts, we're all talking about RWA because the use cases and the benefits are really crucial. But I'm a hype cycle guy. I don't know who's familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. Like from your perspective, the Gartner hype cycle goes like this, and then like this. RWA has just only joined the hype cycle. So it still has to prove it's working, and it still has to prove that it's mainstreamable. That's the one thing. It does work under certain regulatory circumstances anyways. So it has just joined the hype cycle. You're pretty sure it will stay on the hype cycle and it will be a thing if it's on top of that first hill. And we're on the foot of the first hill. So is it going to be a topic in the future? I absolutely think so if we do it right. But as I said, we just technically joined the hype cycle. Another narrative to me that is so interesting, especially when it comes to authentication, is AI on the crossroads with blockchain. That is more and more talked about, and there are use cases. If you only think in birth certificates, talking about trafficking, in educational certificates, where obviously there are a lot of Photoshop experts out there who basically manufacture their certificates. So that wouldn't be possible if AI is able to actually prove it on the blockchain. And there's another topic that is barely discussed. It's there for so many years. Every private person should be interested in this topic, and it's called self-sovereign identity, SSI. Yet nobody cares about it. Everybody's discussing data privacy, but obviously nobody's interested in regulating their own data behavior. How to share it, with whom to share it, with whom to forward it. And the topic is there. It's actually easy to read into it. We all should educate the retail, the B2C people in self-sovereign identity, because it will be a thing especially when it comes to the discussion about CBDCs that I don't want to go deeper into.
Take one thing away from this, SSI.
Yeah, I think the narrative I'm most excited about is Deepen itself, because I think it's an industry where there's a tremendous value, and we are already seeing ton of projects who are onboarding real revenue and real clients. Like in our case, on decentralized storage, we see like Filecoin itself. We are able to get more enterprise users onboarded. Be it some of them are in Web3, some are outside, be it universities, real research institutes, etc. And if you see like other deepen networks like GPUs, which is Akash, Render, IONET, we can really track like on platforms like deepen.ninja that many of them have millions of revenues, which is working. And then there are some new themes, for example, what HiveMapper guys are doing with mapping the whole real world mapping infrastructure, and also GeoDNet with their own wireless Deepen network. And another exciting theme around Deepen is fact that these Deepens are enabling a whole new economy where somebody has to solve the supply side, somebody has to solve the demand side like we are doing, somebody has to solve the capital efficiency side, and then there's a whole meme angle to it on how do you build hyperscalers which compete with the likes of AWS, GCP, or maybe Google Maps in some of the other cases. So I think Deepen is something which can, which holds a lot of value and can also retain and onboard a lot of folks in Web3 and crypto while AI is pulling them into Web 2.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, guys. So we are actually coming up on time. I think this has been a really fruitful discussion. I'm grateful that you all joined us here today. This has been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.